Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Jonathan Haidt. I'm the global CEO of Allison Worldwide, and we are the host of the Sports Momentum stage here at South by Southwest, the only session dedicated to sports. Allison Worldwide has a long history of building sports stories for brands and building community around organizations such as Special Olympics. We launched Bay FC, the San Francisco Women's Soccer Club, and working with many, many brands around sports. And it has really become a centerpiece of consumer and technology and all of the things that South by Southwest is focused on when you talk about music and you talk about entertainment and you talk about brands and marketing and creativity. So we are beyond excited to bring to you today a series of 4 panels featuring 16 experts and pros from inside and outside the lines to share their stories and to share their insights about how sports is really at the center of culture today. With that, I want to put out a few thank yous. Stephanie Agresta, who is our Chief Marketing Officer and Sherpa for South by, who put this entire session together. Lisa Rosenberg, our Global Head of Consumer Brands, President of Consumer Brands, who's worked tirelessly on pulling together panelists and all of the effort. And then also, who I'm going to introduce next, Shane Arman, who heads our sports marketing group, who will be leading the next panel and has really built out Allison's foundation in sports. So with that, I'll hand it to Shane, and we look forward to sharing a lot with you today. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan, and thanks for being here this morning. Let's do a quick video just to give you a sense of get the energy up in the room a little bit. I know it's 10 a.m. and I'm sure we've all had a little bit of caffeine, but we want this to be fun. We want this to be engaging. We'll do some Q&A at the end, but let's kick it over to the video to get us rolling. Awesome, thank you. And just as a reminder, we have 3 amazing panels after this one. A second one in the morning that Jonathan is going to be moderating with NFL player Cam Jordan. That one starts at 11:30 and is on culture and sports. And then after lunch, we're talking about how women are shaping sports. That one is going to be moderated by the co-founder of The Gist. And to close out our day at 4 p.m., our very own Lisa Rosenberg is talking beyond the ad in Super Bowl marketing with 3 Super Bowl marketing experts. So we encourage you to stick around, hang out in our lounge. In terms of any social media posting that you may do, we'd love you to use our hashtags Allison South by Southwest, hashtag South by Southwest 2025, and of course tag us at Allison Worldwide. But without further ado, let's bring up our panelists and let's dive into the conversation. Come on up, guys. Good morning. All right, so we're talking NIL's role in college sports momentum. Let's kick things off with a quick round robin of introductions. Taylor, let's start with you over on the end.
Hi guys, I'm Taylor Jones. I am currently a senior at the University of Texas, where I play basketball there. This is my 3rd year at Texas. I transferred from Oregon State before this, and I'm originally from Dallas, so it was nice coming back home.
Hi, good morning. I'm Steve Denton. I'm the CEO of Open Doors. We're the leading marketplace for college athletes and brands to work together to monetize their name, image, and likeness. Was that like walking on the court when you get introduced? Like walking
Yes.
through there, high-fiving like your teammates?
Yeah, of
Same
course.
thing. Right.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Nick Conant. I'm the president and COO of Sprouts Farmers Market. Anybody here know Sprouts? Anybody? Okay. All right. Well, good. Thanks for shopping us. So yeah, we have about 440 stores across the country, including here in the great state of Texas, and continuing to grow here. But excited to be up with the esteemed group here and with you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. So let's set the stage a little bit. College sports changed forever in July of 2021 with the inauguration of name, image, and likeness payments to student athletes. And in the recent years that have followed, the industry has really gone through transformation. Policy changes, aggressive spends from NIL collectives, and a brand presence that has grown from curious to consistent. And since 2021, the market for NIL has absolutely exploded from $917 million to this year expected to hit over $1.6 billion, with no signs of slowing down. We now have athletic programs worth north of $1 billion. We have conferences valued at north of $10 billion. And the point of all of this is the growing professionalization of college sports, which has extraordinary implications on the entire college sports ecosystem. So excited that we have a lot of representation here across that ecosystem. But now, college sports are poised to undergo even further transformation. The NCAA and its power conferences unanimously supported the motion of settlement for the House Hubbard and Carter cases, agreeing to a framework for revenue sharing, basically allowing institutions to directly pay their student athletes up to $20.5 million annually starting in the 25-26 academic year. New rules will regulate and enforce fair market value of NIL deals. Scholarship limits will disappear and be replaced by roster caps. With the future unknown, I'm really excited to dig in. There's a lot to unpack here. We have about 52 minutes, so let's dive in. I want to just start broad, and let's look at the last 12 months, and let's talk about what you think is the biggest college sports story in that time frame. So let's start with you, Steve.
Well, I think you nailed it, the House settlement, right? With the House settlement, schools being able to pay athletes directly and setting a budget for that just changes the landscape. I mean, when you put a cap of $20.5 million on a school paying all the athletes, that's just not one program, that's all of the athletes. I think that's the biggest thing, that's the biggest transformation in sports. So if you think about the Power Four conferences, 60 schools that are all going to opt in for the $20 million. I mean, that's $1.2 billion right there that the schools are going to directly pay the athletes. So when you think about the landscape of who gets involved in that, NIL, you start thinking about companies like PayPal. You start thinking about companies like ADP. Like the landscape is changing around that. So we ballpark the NIL market at about $2 billion a year right now. With the schools, you're probably going to be about 1.5, 1.6 next year. That's the biggest change. I mean, there's been plenty, but if you'd have told me 7 months ago that I'd be in RFPs with conferences competing with PayPal,
yeah,
I'd be like, I don't know. But
that's fascinating. Thank you, Steve. So Taylor, from your perspective as a student athlete, there's been a lot to be excited about, especially in women's sports. But in your mind, what's the biggest college sports story the last 12 months?
I would say with NIL, every year it continues to grow. And like he was saying about the settlement, I won't be here playing college basketball next year, but I know for my teammates, that's a really big deal. Right now, we are getting a good amount of NIL from like our school's collective, and knowing that they will be able to be paid directly from the school is really exciting, especially with the school that we're from. The University of Texas brings in quite a bit of money, and with the amount of hard work and just dedication that we give every single day, it's really nice to know that everyone will be paid the amount that we should have been getting paid for a while. So I started college basketball in 2019. So this is my 6th year playing. I've had medical redshirt and COVID redshirt year. So I started playing basketball before NIL was a thing. And so being able to see the change from when I first stepped into college to now is really exciting, and just continuing to see the growth. And I think over the last 12 months, there has been a very big change in women's basketball as well, with Caitlin Clark playing, Angel Reese, and just growing names. You see a lot more eyes on women's basketball, and you see a bunch more money that comes into the sport, and we're getting awarded for the things that we're doing every day, and I think it's really exciting to see the growth.
Thank you, Taylor. Nick, what about you?
Well, I'm going to piggyback on Taylor's last comment. So as a little bit about today, both professionally for Sprouts, and we really support women's athletics. That is our core focus. As a father of female athletes, to me, the big story was what's happening in women's sports. And as Taylor mentioned, I think basketball was a catalyst for it. But you're seeing what's happening with the popularity of women's sports, the power of female athletes, and what they're bringing to the market. And I think it's a flywheel where you're seeing it happen in college. Athletes moved into the professional space. Women's athletics professionally are growing. You think about expansion franchises in soccer, women's basketball. You've got a professional women's hockey league. Near to my heart, I have a lacrosse player, and there's a lacrosse league we're looking to be formed right now. You look at what happened this Summer Olympics, and the women crushed it. And then you look at valuations and what's happening with professional female sports franchises and the valuations of those franchises. To me, that creates an amazing, as I mentioned, flywheel for female college athletes to partake in it, and hopefully, a sign of things to come to grow the women's side of the sports.
Absolutely. So let's stick with you, Nick, on that, because Sprouts was an early adopter in the name, image, and likeness world. I think going back to 2022 was the time in which you brokered your first NIL partnerships. And I remember that time, on the agency side, we're constantly in pitch mode, right? We're pitching ideas. We're coming up with big creative ideas for clients. And I had a lot of NIL ideas, but not a lot of them actually stuck with those clients in that time. And so I want to understand a little bit more about why Sprouts decided to go down the path of NIL so early, when there, frankly, were a lot of risks with, an unregulated market. You have young athletes. Why did you decide to dive headfirst, and take us through a little bit more about your NIL strategy?
Sure. So I think for those of you who may not know Sprouts, a little background, it might help answer the question why we did this. Our purpose is all about how we help people live and eat better. And we focus on a small part of the grocery. There's a $1.6 trillion grocery market. We focus on a $200 billion portion that is, we call targeted customers the health enthusiast. And that customer cares deeply about what they put in and on their body, and they're discerning. They're organic, they might be vegan, they could be paleo, and oftentimes they're athletes. And so part of this is how do we serve our purpose? The other piece of this is, I mentioned that we were in the green room talking, one of our core values at Sprouts is love being different, and we do things differently than most people in the grocery and food space. And so when the NIL opportunity started to come up, we looked at it as a way to talk about what we do for women's health and performance, and talk about all the things that we do to help mental health, physical health. And with the female athlete, think about what they have to go through. They're performing on the field or on the court, but also in the classroom. And we believe what you eat, your nutrition, is a major part of helping be successful there. So we frankly got into it a little bit because we just felt it was the right thing to do. No one was really playing in the female space like we thought the opportunity was, and the market opportunity was. And so we went for it. And so in October of 22, we signed 50 female college athletes in celebration of the 50th anniversary of Title IX. And that was our first foray in. It was a really great experience. And then what happened is we started to build around this. We became the official healthy grocer of the Big 12, same for the Pac-12 at the time, and started to build a platform where it wasn't just about the athlete itself, but how do we tell our story with that athlete being core core to that. And from that was born what we called Powered by Sprouts, Powhered, Powered by Sprouts. And it created a great platform for us to continue to grow and expand this. And I think for us, we think it's a fit for our purpose. We think it's the right thing to do for female athletes, and it helps us play in local markets. And it's a really good way for us to, when our store is in Austin, Texas, or Phoenix, Arizona, or Greensboro, North Carolina, we can attach ourselves to a community there, and it's a great way to bring our brand to life. So it's been successful for us so far.
Thank you, Nick. And Steve, it doesn't sound like you need to do any convincing on Nick on the name, image, and likeness front, but I want to get a quick hitter from you. If you had to convince a brand about the benefits of investing in name, image, and likeness, what would you tell them?
I'd introduce them to Nick.
That's fair. That's fair.
But I would say this, to piggyback on that, female college athletes right now is probably the most effective media buy you can make in sport. Because the metrics, just if your TAM, right, if your target market is 18 to 28-year-olds and geographically dispersed, female student athletes, their fandom is so much bigger than the guy's side of the house. Their engagement on social, I don't know, they know what they're doing. It's amazing to see it. And like, I'll give you a number. So the number one men's basketball team, well, how about this? When you take the top 16 teams in men's basketball right now, their rosters have an average social media following, the total roster, 400,000 social followers on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. On the women's side, it's 1.6 million. It's 4x the number of social followers and you see that when you look at the 16 top-ranked teams on both sides of that as you go into March Madness. And the engagement metrics are 5x what they are for traditional influencers or what they are for male athletes. And I love the male athletes that we have in the network, but I mean, you guys hit the home run, because the female student athlete it's just the most impactful media buy you can make in sport right now, as far as cost and efficacy, and to be able to, like, Taylor's following, she played at Oregon. She's got a big following in Oregon still, so that's a DMA you can get after. She's got a huge following here in Texas, and college fans follow the athlete where pro fans follow the team. So with the transfer portal, like, you really can get into DMAs, and I'll leave you with this. Everybody gets hung up on the unicorns, right? The All-American unicorn that's got 2 million followers out there, and they won a Heisman Trophy award, and they're amazing athletes to partner with. But you could partner with 30 folks that sit in the middle there, where they've got 50,000 followers or 100,000 followers, and it's more organic and natural for them. And you can replicate that audience for half the cost and more efficacy. So I just think that'd be my pitch. But Nick's already on board.
Well, I mean, that's a pretty
network,
good pitch.
so we're all good.
I feel like Taylor might walk out of this room with like a couple new name, image, and likeness deals. So Taylor, I want to get your perspective on this, because as you mentioned, part of what I was really fascinated about, you hit on, which is the fact that you started your college career before the advent of NIL, and now you're really in the thick of this massive shift. So you transferred from Oregon State, you're now at Texas. Texas has been at the top of the AP polls for most of this year, so congrats on that. But take us through what the differences between what it was like before NIL and what it's like now, and how sort of your approach to everything has changed because of it.
Yeah, so when I started at Oregon State, the first check that I got was $250, and I was supposed to make that last for a month. And I was a freshman living in the dorms. And when I got that check, I was so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, I finally have money. And I realized soon after that in the real world, it's not really that much money. And I ended up that year being able to survive in the dorms as a freshman. And then my sophomore year, COVID happened. And I the Oregon State hit a budget cut, and so our stipend checks, I was now off campus, our stipend checks that we get every month, they're supposed to cover your rent and all your food and basically everything. And so my rent was $850 and my stipend check was $750. So I was already starting behind. And so I ended up having to get a job. I was an Instacart driver whenever I wasn't playing basketball. And I was telling them how on Sundays, every Sunday was our off day, I would wake up in the mornings, I would log on to the Instacart app, and I would go to the grocery store and spend my whole entire day doing Instacart like deals and doing all that. And I would make maybe $150, $200 if it was a good day. And I did that for about a year and a half just to try and make some extra money. And then NIL happened my third year when I was at Oregon State, and it still wasn't a huge thing. Everyone was sort of unsure about it, and I got some people reaching out to me, but it was more so like, try our product and post on your story, like not any money revenue. And so I entered the transfer portal. That was a year after NIL had happened. And it's interesting, my experience. So when I was in the portal, the NIL was not a huge thing that schools were selling. It was like, here's our school, it's great. You might get a little bit of NIL if you come here. It's still new territory. And even Texas told me that too. And so when I came here, I came for the school, didn't know anything about the money, and now it's just completely different. I would never have imagined that I would be sitting up here having this conversation with y'all 6 years ago when I first started out. And it's an amazing blessing to be a part of this growing part of women's basketball and just college athletics in general. And I would say NIL is something that has changed everyone's lives as a college athlete, and I'm just very thankful for it, and it's exciting to continue to see the growth.
Thanks, Taylor. Were there any surprising off-the-wall brands that reached out with crazy offers? I know I've read some stories out there about some of that, especially early on. Like, do you remember any of those like that came into your inbox?
At the beginning, there was like small, like tiny boutiques that would reach out to me, like in Corvallis is where Oregon State was. And I remember they would reach out and like, here, I'll give you a pair of biker shorts if you post our brand on social media. And so it was just like really small things. And now it's completely changed where one Instagram story is like X amount of money. And my mind just can't really comprehend that after seeing the other side of it. And right now I'm gonna do a deal with Celsius, and I just would not have imagined that.
So Steve,
I can weigh in on. I've seen some crazy deals. Because I mean, we move a couple $100 million a year through our pipes to college athletes, and I love that story because the average NIL deal right now is $1,500. Everybody always thinks it's millions and millions. Average NIL deal is $1,500, and it's so meaningful to a college athlete. Like when you get away from the unicorns, like that $250 was important to you when you first got it. And we do like 200 on-campus events a year where we provide NIL education to athletes and things like that. And when I get to meet these amazing student athletes and they tell me about how they got $1,500 from Dave's Hot Chicken. Everybody loves Dave's Hot Chicken. So I've never had one, but apparently they're amazing because they're all over the place. But when they tell me like, I got this check and it helped me make a car payment and it really like made my month, or I got a chance to meet you and some of your colleagues at a dinner a couple months ago, and one of your teammates was telling me how they send money home to their family, and it's just so impactful to them. But you started with a lot of merch, and you have a lot of deals out there that still do merch, and that'll get you so far. But there is it's leveling out a little bit now. It's not as wild west as it was 2-3 years ago because of compliance and disclosures, and you got Deloitte and Touche getting involved now with fair market value evaluations. So, but it's leaned out. But the average deal is $1,500.
Yeah, I think that's super important context. And Taylor, I want to go back to you for a second and tell us about yourself and your personal brand. I mean, when did you really start thinking about what you were posting on social relative to potential NIL opportunities for yourself? And like, how do you keep up with that, with everything else that you have going on between practice and training and family and friend obligations? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so before I came to Texas, my social media platform was basically just like for fun. I was just posting about my everyday activities and didn't really think much of it. But when I got to Texas and I had already seen how certain athletes had changed their brand, and a lot of people in athletics talked about creating your brand, but this was before NIL and no one really specified on what it was, because it was like if you made your brand before NIL, you build up yourself, you create this like persona of you over social media, but like what's the point in a sense if you're not able to get any revenue from it or sort of gain traction from that? And when I got to Texas, everyone was really talking about building your brand and really changing your social media to reflect an audience and reflect the like people that are following you. And when I got here, especially me being a kid from Texas, I went away, I came back and sort of was able to make that a part of my brand, and just really learning more about yourself and learning myself was really good about what I wanted to post on social media, because at first, when you first get the deals, it's like, yes, I'll do this. Yes, of course I'll do this. Yes, I'll do this. And it wasn't until like probably a year later that I realized I can't say yes to everyone that asks me. And you sort of just have to narrow down the playing field and be more specific about who you want to be on social media and who you want the people to see you. And for me, I just try and be as authentic as possible. And I will say, when you get in season and how busy we are right now, it is hard to like stay up on social media because all we do is basketball. So everything that I would post about my life is basketball. And just trying to make my content more about outside of just the sport. And yeah, that's sometimes challenging with our schedule and how busy we are, but it's very, very beneficial to be able to like personalize your own brand.
Yeah, and Steve, I want to come over to you on this one, because I know that part of what Open Doors does is really help remove some of that friction and make lives easier for athletes who are looking to really maximize their name, image, and likeness. But I want to focus a little bit more on what Open Doors is doing from an education standpoint, because I think that's something that's not talked about enough, is providing resources, insights to these student athletes who now basically are running their own personal business. So tell us a little bit more about what Open Doors does in that space, Steve.
Yeah, thanks for asking, because it's important to build out that entire student athlete, because 99% of them are going to go pro in something else, and you've got to be able to help. So what we do on our platform, we obviously have the marketplace where brands and athletes can work together and do those deals, but I love our education area. So like I said, we were on the road last year, over 200 times on campus, across the country, doing NIL education sessions. And you got to do them at night because you're in class during the day, and then you got practice and film study and gym and trying to graduate. Like, we got a lot going on. So you're hosting these things at night, but you're teaching about NIL navigation. But the other things is we've got financial literacy programs that sit within the platform, because some folks for the first time are getting checks that are sizable, and financial literacy is something that you can help with. So we have partners that help with that. We partner with Movember to do mental health awareness. So we've got an entire mental health awareness section within the platform. I can't say who yet, but we've partnered with major job board to put job opportunities on the platform. So, you think about graduation's coming, many of these student athletes they're gonna go pro somewhere else, and they're gonna do something else. So exposing them to not just commercial opportunities, but jobs. And then lastly, brand building. So we've partnered with a couple of agencies that do certifications for athletes to help them understand, because you probably didn't start out thinking you were an influencer or a creator, right? You evolved. And so how do you do that, and how do you get good at that? So we partnered with some marketing agencies that we've done master classes with that sit in the platform that help these athletes understand how to build their brand. So we're focusing on that whole athlete, and not just, let's get them money.
Absolutely. Nick, what's been your experience? I mean, I know Sprouts has brokered over 160 NIL deals. Talk about some of the opportunities and maybe even some of the challenges early on in bringing those deals to life with college athletes.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's been about 160 deals. We're really proud of the work and the athletes we've partnered with to do that. There's a lot more opportunity than challenge out there. I think just as you hear from the panel here, the growth is a massive opportunity for us. I think a handful of things as you look at it. The biggest both opportunity and challenge for us as a retailer and a supporter of athletes is finding the right fit. And when you nail that fit with, for us, a female athlete who is focused on their nutrition, believes in it, lives it, and it's authentic to who they are, and thus it fits with us, that's where the magic happens. And believe it or not, it's harder to find that than you would think. And so I think that's a continued opportunity, is how do you find the right fit for us that resonates authentically with our customer and our community, and that's a big piece. Listen, the athletes themselves, they're still young adults and way more mature than I was at that age. As Taylor, because my goodness, Taylor, you're more mature than I probably am now. But I would say, you're still dealing with young adults, and some of those young adults also may or may not have the best representation guiding them to make the best decisions. And we're never into anything pressuring an athlete, but we want to make sure we help them. And I think that creates some challenges. And then the new one for us that's come up recently is, how do we manage around the transfer portal? So our strategy is about how do we find athletes that connect to the communities that we serve, not a national master brand. We want to be local with it. And when you get a partner, an athlete, and she decides she wants to transfer somewhere else, that's just a new dynamic, right? And then everyone's doing with the transfer portal. But I think that's something we are learning how to handle and manage, and I think will be a continued challenge as more athletes take advantage of that portal.
Yeah, I think that's just the tip of the spear of all of the issues that the transfer portal is creating. Taylor, I want to come back to you for a second and hear from you about, what was the most difficult or challenging or surprising thing once you started to do a couple of these deals with brands? What was the most challenging part of it for you?
I think one of the most challenging parts was finding the time to do this. And a lot of times, especially with us right now in season, so I'll give you a rundown of our last week. A week ago, today's Tuesday, correct? So we had practice Tuesday, had practice early morning Wednesday, flew out to South Carolina, had another practice that night. And then we're in South Carolina for the SEC tournament. On Thursday, we have another practice. We have to go and watch film, watch the game that's about to happen to figure out who we're playing. The next day, wake up, have a practice, and then later that night, we have a game. Next day, do the same thing. Next day, do the same exact thing. And yesterday and today is the first 2 off days that we've had in probably like a week and a half. And these off days are now, especially with us being in season, is basically full, because I know a lot of my teammates what their schedule looks like yesterday and today. It is all NIL stuff and getting the photo shoots done, getting the podcasts done, and doing a bunch of stuff on your social media. And we may post it later, but most of it is actually done on 1 or 2 days. And I would say being able to manage school and athletics, and now people always say like you're a student athlete, that's it, that's all you do. But no, NIL is a completely different beast now, and a lot of it is really fun to do, and sometimes it doesn't even feel like work at all. It's just normal stuff that we would be doing, but it has been pretty difficult trying to manage that, because when I first got to college, it was, okay, how do you manage your academics and athletics? Well, now it's a whole different beast that you add on, but it's been very eye-opening, and it's also a very big blessing to be a part of all of this.
Thanks, Taylor. So as the state of women's sports continues to explode, there's obviously increased scrutiny around equity across the sports ecosystem, and NIL, I think, is no exception. You mentioned Title IX and the 50th anniversary, and the Department of Education recently just revoked guidance on Title IX and athlete pay. And what this means is that as athletic departments are thinking about how to dole out that $20.5 million in direct payments allowed by the pending antitrust settlement, athletes in sports that generate the most revenue, and this is mostly football and men's basketball, stand to benefit disproportionately relative to their female counterparts. So a great example of this is the Texas Tech athletic director just came out and publicly announced distribution amounts under the new revenue sharing concept, and I want to share this with you. Of that $20.5 million, 74% would go to football, 17.5% would go to men's basketball, 2% to women's college basketball, 1.9% to baseball, and 3.6% to all other sports. Just want to let that sink in for a second. So, Steve, I want to turn to you. Is this new interpretation of Title IX to NIL equitable?
That's a big, meaty topic. So, look, Title IX originally set up to have equitable scholarships from the universities, most of them public universities. So that makes a ton of sense. And where you see that percentages that you laid out is what we're seeing from most of the schools that we talk to, right? The percentage of the $20 million is going to get paid out based on the revenue that comes in. But that's not the end of the story, right? That's just what the school pays. But you heard Taylor talk about collectives, right? Collectives are collections of wealthy donors or donors who pool their money to help augment that pool. And then you've got what's called commercial NIL, which are companies like Knicks, brands who will pay athletes to do different parts of, to do spokes type work for them or influencer creator work for them. So the pool of money is much bigger than the $20 million. So I think there's a lot. Every day there's a hearing on it, there's some sort of judgment on it. It's just trying to predict what's going to play out there is, I mean, they kicked the can on that last week, and they kicked the can on it for another 2 months. So, you know, I think we're just going to live in this world where that 20 million is going to be the starter. They're going to dole it out based on how the revenue comes in. But I think you're going to look at a world where that distribution you talk about makes sense from a revenue standpoint. But I worry about the Olympic sports. I worry about the representation of that. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see the more clever schools route more of that money, guaranteed money, to some of the non-revenue producing sports because they know they can replace that with commercial deals with the revenue producing. Like, it's a lot easier to get an NIL deal for Taylor than it is not to, we'll just pick on a program, maybe your diving program at Texas, right? Like, it might be a harder NIL deal to get. So it's an interesting way to move the money around because you can make up for it with commercial NIL. And that's the value of these athletes as influencers and as spokespeople. Like, I don't think 20 million is enough money for Texas to compete. They need 40 million. And they have it. I mean, they can get it. And brands. So I think that's just the tip of the iceberg there. And then the last thing I'll say on that, around the distribution of that money is on the commercial side of it, you can't tell a brand where they're going to spend their money. Like, I can't tell you how you're going to spend your marketing dollars. Like, fair market value is going to be whatever Nick and his company decides these athletes are worth. So Title IX won't apply to that at all, right? You're just relying on the humanity of the brands and who they want to work with to reach their ICP. I think with the schools, scholarships will still be applied by that, but the payments, it's 50-50 right now. And I think under the current administration, I think you're going to see it paid out just like the revenue comes in. That's where the wind's blowing right now.
Nick, I want to get your point of view because Sprouts works across many sports. You have a lot of diversity in the deals that you've done. Many of those are deals with female athletes. Is your approach going to change given some of these new shifts in name, image, and likeness?
No. I think Steve knows the space and articulated it well, but I think for us, we're going to continue to stay the course and invest solely in women's sports and then female athletes in those schools. And for us, honestly, we even look at, outside of the athlete themselves, the sports themselves, we support gymnastics and cross country and tennis and volleyball and some of the sports that are so-called, non-revenue generating, because again, for us, it's about the right individual, the right fit, supporting women's performance and being tied local to the community. So if anything, maybe I'll just say I feel even a little bit better about what we're doing and trying to help female athletes get a voice and find their support, and you'll see us stay the course.
Great.
Shane, if I could just come on the back. One thing, the one number that's fascinating, it is the great equalizer in college sports, because when you strip out what the schools are going to pay the athletes and maybe what the collectives pay the athletes, and you just look at what the brands pay the athletes to be spokesperson or influencers for them, the women out-earn the men. For every dollar spent by brands, the women get 59 cents. And so the women, like you're helping support that, the women out-earn the men when you strip out the brand that wants to sell tickets to the football game that is paying for that. But when you just look at brands that value these athletes as influencers, the women out-earn the men. And I think it's the great equalizer in college sports in terms of being able to participate at that. Because when you look at a P4 women's basketball program, the roster under the new layout, average, you're going to pay $1 million for that roster. Men's basketball program is going to cost you 4.5. Football program is going to cost 15. You need 30. But when you take the brands and the NIL dollars, the female athletes will replace that with how they operate and how they execute. So I think it's the great equalizer, and you see it with how the dollars are being spent.
Taylor, when I shared those percentages of how that money is going to be doled out with Texas Tech as an example, how did that make you feel?
So I've looked into a lot of this topic, and I knew about Texas Tech and how they were going to share their revenue, and I don't like it. I mean, I won't be a part of that because that will it'll happen next year, correct? Yep. So I would think if I was still going to be playing next year, and if Texas came out with those numbers, I would not be too happy about it, especially when you look at the successful programs at, like if we're just saying at Texas, women's basketball, volleyball, softball, a bunch of women's sports that are like so successful that would not be getting hardly any of that money. And it's sort of about fairness and realizing that we work just the same amount, if not more, than what the men do. And our basketball program was sitting out, we've been top 5 all year. And if you compare it to our counterpart, our men's program, they have had the year that they have had, and I won't talk much about that, but if you look at like the NIL money that they've made, from what I know, compared to us, the difference is drastic. And of course, like we're very thankful for the money that we get, but compared to the guys, they get a bunch more. And just knowing that that is going to like continue to happen if we're not able to advocate for ourselves and have a voice and speak up about what we deserve. And like everyone has said, women's sports is growing and people are watching, but it's, when will that be enough for us to get what we deserve? And I'm happy to be a part of this change and to see where it started when I was first in college to where it's at now. It's a beautiful thing to watch the growth, but there is still so much more that needs to be done and should be done. And I'm just very hopeful and excited to hopefully see the changes.
Yeah, I feel like there's just more structural change that needs to happen. I mean, let's take last year, for example. If you look at the men's versus the women's ratings, and ratings equal dollars and cents in the world of college sports, the women outdrew the men. So I think that's a great example of a very clear and obvious proof point, and the ecosystem has not caught up yet, and it remains to be seen how quickly or if or when that may happen. And I want to go to you, Nick, and get an understanding from you about if there's a role, and you as well, Steve, for brands to play in helping shift that ecosystem of dollars and cents, and what your perspective is on that.
So I think first off, to be clear, I think all athletes deserve to participate in NIL and protect their brand, build a brand, and drive value what they do. So in all sports, all athletes, I think, deserve that. And we support that cause, wholly. I think, I go back to, for us, we got into this because we felt it was the right thing to do to support female athletes. And to be fair, it was a fit for our brand position, our marketing strategy, so it fit for us. And I think that's the important thing, is it's for a company or a retailer that's going to be driven by the fit and what's their strategic intent. And when we invest dollars, is it the right thing to do for our brand and business, our purpose and our values? And I think that's how everyone's going to look at it. And the good news is for us is I feel like it's a really, really great fit in supporting female athletes, and it works for us. But other brands may or may not feel the same. And to be honest with you, I can't say I'm going to be able to tell them one way or the other. They need to make their own decisions. I go back to, I think we believe we're doing the right thing for the brand, the business, and the individuals and the athletes by what we're going to do. And, as I mentioned, Shane, we're going to continue to support female athletes in the long run.
Steve, let's shift gears to Open Doors a little bit and think about 1-year plan, 3-year plan, 5-year plan. What are the opportunities for your company? Talk us through that and how you're thinking about maximizing them.
Let's just talk about the opportunities for the athletes, right? Because if we can help athletes win, we'll win, right? Like we got this very simple mission statement at Open Doors. It's help every athlete win. And you have to define what winning looks like. It could be through mental health awareness. It could be financial literacy. It could be compensation, training, get a job. Winning is a great elastic term, right? That allows you to define that. But when I look at the world, NIL reminds me, I had an internet company in 1998, and I'm old. Some of you might not have been born. But 98 was crazy in the internet. There was no Google. There was not a lot of laws, a lot of registry. It was nuts. And that was the 4th year that the internet was being monetized in this country. And you know how much money brands spend on the internet in 1998? Probably not, I'll tell you, because I introduced the topic. $800 million. We're 4 years into NIL, and I said it's $1.6 billion, $2 billion. Now, I'm not saying the NIL space is going to grow at the exponential rate that the internet has grown. But when I look at the opportunity for Open Doors and I look at the opportunity for college athletes and brands, it's that influencer budget. So that influencer budget exceeds search now. It's like $35 billion that advertisers spend on influencers, and it's growing at like a 12% CAGR. And college athletes, like on our platform, there's 115, 120,000 of them, but their fandom is over 300 million. So they're clearly in the influencer space, and the dollars they're playing for right now are small against like when $200-400 million that are going through there. So I think the opportunity for us and the college athletes is that $35 billion influencer market that brands who are opportunistic and want to find the right fit. I mean, influencers work because there's authenticity and they have the right audience and they're on point with their brand. I think college athletes have a huge opportunity there to monetize their name, image, and likeness with these brands when you have the right fit. And there's a huge spend in that market, and it's growing exponentially. It is the biggest spend with digital media budgets. So I would stop talking to brands about NIL budgets. You probably don't have an NIL budget. You got a sponsorship budget and you got a media budget, right? Like, NIL is a scary term for brands. I don't have an NIL budget. What is that? That's a college thing, right? I do have an influencer budget. That's the opportunity for these college athletes, is that TAM is huge.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
I want to dig in on a more granular level to get some perspectives on some interesting or different NIL deals that we've all seen recently. For me, it was International Women's Day. So on Saturday, you had Florida quarterback DJ Lagway announce with Florida Victorious, which is their collective, that they were making a six-figure donation to support women's sports. So softball, volleyball, gymnastics. I haven't seen as much purpose in the NIL space, so that was a really refreshing deal for me. But Taylor, I want to start with you. We were talking a little bit about some of the deals that you've been seeing. What has caught your eye recently from an NIL deal standpoint?
I would say an interesting one. I mean, we talked a lot about like building your brand and like what your like social media platform aligns with who you are and like what you do and everything. So I think an interesting one is there was a bunch of like big name basketball players and athletes that did a McDonald's brand. And as like, I remember when I was younger seeing like celebrities, when I would go to McDonald's and like get one of the toys and it would have, they'd be associated with the celebrity. I'd be super excited. But now as an athlete, we try and be as healthy as possible. And I don't really know if McDonald's aligns with that. It was really interesting to see. And I mean, I think it's cool that a lot of the athletes had like their own meal or customizable stuff on the menu. And I think it's cool. But how that aligns with us as athletes, I think it's really interesting. And I mean, it's to each their own, I guess, but it's cool. But it doesn't really align, I would say, as an athlete, you know.
You're not eating a quarter pounder and chicken nuggets before a big game?
No, that's not really our pregame meal. So.
Well, I know Sprouts has got a lot of healthy options for student athletes. Nick, what have you seen recently from an NIL deal standpoint?
Yeah, what I think maybe more in a few different pockets. I know there's one here in the University of Texas, but tools and businesses that are popping up to help support the athletes and how they manage NIL, manage their content, manage their brand, protect their brand. There's so much out there that Taylor's, I think, done a great job articulating it for an athlete to figure out in this space. And let's be honest, the money is sitting in the sponsor side and the corporate side, but how do we continue to enable and empower athletes? And selfishly for us, if the athletes can be more confident, more prepared, better coached, and have tools to create better content support, that's good for us. So I'm really excited about what we can do, and I like what Steve said about how Open Doors is trying to support the athlete in this crazy new time. And to me seems to be a trend to keep our eye on, and how companies are doing that to help them, and then in turn create a higher return for people like us.
Awesome. And we are going to open it up to Q&A. So if you have those questions, get them ready. Steve, what's a notable deal that you've seen recently?
I was sitting here thinking, I was blanking on it because I mean, we see thousands and thousands of them, and I was thinking about some really great ones that are going on right now, but I can't talk about them because they're filming, and they're putting them together. Like, I'm blanking. I was sitting here listening. I was like, don't come to me. I'm the right person to ask, but I'm just like, we've had just so many come through, and notable. I mean, I love the one that Epsilon did last year. They wanted every female athlete in the NCAA tournament to have an NIL deal. And I think they offered them all like $500 or something. You did that deal. And I thought that was for many of these athletes, it was the first NIL deal they ever got. And it was Epsilon, the marketing company that was promoting women's awareness and women's careers. And the fact that they put a deal out for every rostered player in women's and Division I basketball tournament, and did that at scale, was great to see. And from a branding standpoint, it was just, I don't know what the ROI was on it. Like I don't know when they sat in front of the CEO and justified the spend. I don't know what the metrics were, but the awareness was incredible.
More brand awareness, right?
100%.
Than like a
Top of
specific
funnel.
metric of like, hey, we're out here and we're really supporting female athletes in this way and bringing them into the fold to where they haven't gotten those kind of opportunities.
I love the deal. It was a great deal. So there.
Awesome.
There's one.
I mean, that's a great one. That's a great one. We do have one more question, but I want to give the audience a chance. If anyone has a question, you can come up to the microphone right here and ask that, or you can just shout it.
Hi, and thank you for the panel. It's very interesting. I work for we have a family office, and we are specialized investing in sports, and in each sports and in women's sports as well. So first, what you said, the 4X, was very interesting. We work in rugby. Ilona Meyer explode, right now in rugby, just by herself. She has more followers than the 5 top rugby athletes in the world. It's amazing to see how it goes. My question is more we work between, so we are based in the US. I have a strange accent, but I'm based here. We work between the US and Europe. In Europe right now, the academy in sports and university, but also it doesn't work exactly like college sport here in the US and in Europe. People are freaking out about the NIL, possibility for athletes to come to the US and to lose, the European athletes because they will come to the US. How do you see that?
You're asking me? Already?
I think, Steve, you are the right person.
Maybe. So that's an interesting topic. And what's interesting about Europe is in many of the countries, corporations can only own 49% of these teams, and the public owns the other 51%. NIL in the United States, if you're an international student, you can't do NIL deals in this country because it impacts your visa. You have to actually do those deals outside the country. So you see a lot of student athletes, when you talked about filming, they film when they go back home. And they'll film it in Canada, or they'll film it in Sweden when they go back home. So, and it's actually a pretty big challenge right now with the schools who are going to pay directly. They're going to have a problem paying international student athletes. So I think the talent will bring them here, but there's some things that have to be worked out on how international students are going to get paid and not impact their visa. That's the big hurdle right now with the international students here. And it's not solved yet. Here, we can solve it, but it's kind of wonky right now. We got to make it a little bit more elegant. So,
Thanks for your question. Any others? Come on up.
Thank you guys so much. This has really been great. My name is Zach Sagal. I work at UBS in the Sports and Entertainment Group. Obviously, it's in the financial side. But question for you guys, a little bit on a different note, in dealing with NIL and negotiation, everything like that. Can you talk a little bit about NIL agents? Are you dealing with them directly in these negotiations? I know it's a bit different than professional sports where there's players associations and certification, everything like that. It seems like the NIL agents seems like the Wild West, even in the Wild West of the NIL. So I was just hoping you guys could touch a little bit about that.
Yes, we do all the time, right? And it's we talked a little bit about this earlier. It is one of the challenge areas in college sports right now. You've got top-end athletes have great representation, the folks that you've heard of. Mid-tier athletes have representation that is good, but there's no rule set around it. And a lot of athletes' representation is challenging, right? They might even have 3 or 4 folks that represent them. So typically, it's one of the areas that I think needs to be addressed, which is agent representation, because they can all have agents, but the agents who are going to invest in them heavily are expecting a return, right? So they're really targeting the top athletes, and then it's a great question. I wish I had a better answer for you. It is a problem area.
Taylor, what about you? And then I know we're at time, but Taylor, I want to hear, do you have an agent, and what was the calculus around your decision to have one or not to have one?
I don't have one for NIL. When I'm done playing basketball, I'll get one for my professional career. But so at Texas, we have someone her name is Lisa. She helps us a lot with NIL deals, and she works hand in hand with our collective. We also have someone, she's here, Delaney, who helps us get deals. And so at Texas, we don't really need one. I know there's a few people on my team who do have agents, and they enjoy having them. But for me, I didn't really care for one once I got here, because I know that I can also reach out to brands, and brands can reach out to me directly, and I like being able to see this stuff and being able to have direct communication with these brands and these people, and that I just think me representing myself, I'm able to do that well. And some people enjoy it, and some people like having agents. I think if I was like Caitlin Clark, of course I would have one, but it sort of just depends on who you are and your following and whatever your own liking, if you want one or not.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Taylor. Appreciate you all being here. And stick around. Our next session starts in just a half hour. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.